Number one podcasting platform for African stories.
Dan, Donald, Gavin, man, it's a pleasure to see you guys. It's been such a long time since I talked to a couple of you. But man, happy Africa Podcast Day. How are you?
Hey, thank you for having us. Lovely to see you all.
To you too.
Yeah, we're happy to be here.
Man, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you guys. I think it's probably most important for us to do introductions first before we kind of jump into this great conversation that we're going to have about running a podcast network in Africa. So I guess I'll kick us off. I'm Kevin Y. Brown. I am the Chief Content Officer and Head of Strategy at AfriPods.
Hi, Kevin. Nice to meet you. I'm Donald. I am the co-founder of the Gold Coast Reports podcast network in Ghana.
I'm Gavin Kennedy from Solid Gold in Johannesburg, South Africa. We specialize in podcasts and audiobook production.
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Aceda. I am the founder and CEO of a company called SemaBOX. We're based out of Nairobi. We make podcasts for all types of genres and styles. We are trying to give the technical solutions for people to be able to tell stories. And yeah, we're counting down to episode 1000 in hopefully a couple of weeks.
With that being said, I really want to jump right in. You know I value you guys' time, but I also value your insight and your expertise. With that being said, first question is, why is the podcast network important in Africa? And what inspired you to actually start your podcast network? Donald, please take us away.
Okay. All right. So basically for us, when we started getting into podcasting, we had initially started with an idea for one or two shows. And then we realized that, our creativity that we wanted to do so many different things. We felt like there was space for so many different conversations. And then, these conversations were key to different, communities. So we figured that, if we're going to create podcasts, then we would have to create to satisfy all these different communities. And I guess that's how, for us, a network, the idea of a network began.
Okay. Cool. Gavin?
Excuse me. This is a little tricky to answer because we didn't set out to start a podcast network. The podcast network kind of evolved as a consequence of what we were doing. We were helping people make podcasts, hobbyists, corporates, a wide range of content. And we needed to share that with our potential customers. We needed to showcase some of the work we're doing. So we set aside a page on our website and started adding the podcasts we were making. And then you look again and there's 10, there's 20, and now there's over 100 on there. So we didn't get up and say, let's start a podcast network. This is our business, but we can't be making podcasts and not sharing them and showcasing the work that we're doing. So by default, we end up with this part of our website that's got a huge number of podcasts on it. However, as a consequence of that, we're not a podcast network in the way that people might think of it. We're not active marketers of the content in the network. We're more of an aggregator of it. We build a page per person. So when you click on the podcast, it opens up a page where you can contact them via email, socials, listen to their podcast. Very basic connectivity platform, launch pad, landing page offering, as opposed to, okay, guys, we've got 100 podcasts. Who's cross-promoting who's doing what's the strategy? We're less of that and more of a technical network.
Okay. Sounds nice. Great, man. So, Dan.
The network. I think the network part was something we discovered as we went. What we initially wanted to do was to provide people with an opportunity and a way to make content consistently. So we were giving people technical support to do that. And then we discovered that as we went, that these creators kind of had the same challenges, the same problems on the journey. And so there was a lot of value in building something that could benefit everyone. And so then, thinking of it as a group as opposed to 100 individual creators. And so that's what we've ended up doing. And, you know, again, and I agree with what Gavin was saying, it's hard to say, kind of cross-posting, these things are hard to do because people are in different genres, different styles. But I think what we are trying to do is a more bulk approach. So we will approach it the same way legacy media approaches it. You sell CBS or you sell NBC or you sell, and so that's our approach.
Okay, thank you. So I kind of want to, you guys all share something in common. You, as a way of finding talent, you know what I mean, in these emerging markets for podcasting, you've all have either started the incubator programs or have done joint ventures with creators. How's your experience been, and what is one thing that someone who's looking to start a podcast network should be aware of? Donald, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think it's first of all, it's something Dan mentioned that I would like to use to start to speak on this. I think people come into podcasting with different mindsets, interests, and different styles in which that they want to do their podcast. And so for us, one thing that we've noticed is, okay, so, you know, you have to understand the different interests that people have. You have to understand the different demographics that these podcasters or creators might fit into. And yes, I think once you start to understand these things, then you can start to understand what sort of contents that you can create, and then what communities that these content that you are creating would speak more to. You understand? So yeah, I think you know, that's one thing that, you know, if you are building or starting a podcast network, that's something to consider as well. And then also, of course, resources. Do you have I think Dan also mentioned providing technical solutions for people to curate content. Like, as a network, are you going to have the resources that is required to help them produce this podcast, and also to, you know, market and promote these shows as well? You know, so I think these are some of the things to consider if you want to start a network. Yeah.
Okay. Gavin?
It's an ever-expanding question. I've got lots of answers in different directions. I think everything we say today is got to be framed in the understanding that although we've been making podcasts for a few years, it's still very, very early in the space. This is not a mature market. Ad agencies don't know how to make them. It's not programmatic, so they can't buy it. We've still got a long way to go before this is part of everybody's budgeting and planning, and there's a line item that says, let's make a podcast. At the moment, the majority of the money that's being spent on corporate podcasts is coming out of another budget somewhere. It's coming out of digital media, or it's coming out of Women's Day budget. And so it's not yet part of people's overall marketing or communication strategy, which means it's inconsistent in terms of people coming into it to put money in to support stuff. Also, as a consequence of that being the case, the people with money are using the metrics they're familiar with. The first question is, how big is your audience? What's the cost per thousand? And those are the wrong metrics for podcasting. You know, there's no wastage. If 12 people listen to my podcast on how to breed fish with yellow dots, all 12 care about fish with yellow dots. There's no wastage. So what's the value of reaching 12 people who are 100% committed to that content versus, well, we reached 1,000 people, but only 4 cared, and it was cheap. So those are the challenges on the demand side. People aren't throwing money at it. Also, given that it's early, we don't know what's going to pop and succeed over the next 5 years. So 5 years from now, we're going to say, well, it was fairly obvious it was going to be this kind of content or this kind of programming. But at this stage, it's not. So we have got to favor novelty. We've got to look at people who come with an idea that is different, a different implementation of either the technology or the programming or the style or something. It can't just be, let's take a radio show and make a podcast version of it and deliver it on demand. That's passé, and you know, radio stations are doing that just by recording their shows and putting them out. So we've got to look for novelty. You've got to look for grit. People have got to have grit, man. I've made 6 podcasts. Why am I not famous? Why are people not throwing money at me to be an influencer? Because it's early for the tech. It's early for the concept, let alone for your program. It's a long way to go. You've got to have incredibly motivated people. You can't just have somebody who was sitting around the bar on a Friday night, had an idea and said, Monday, I'm going to make a podcast. I think it's a cool idea. Podfade written all over that. So this has got to be somebody who's sweated this thing for months or years already. They've started a newsletter. They've started a little side business. There's something more to it than just, hey, I think this is a cool idea for a podcast. Ideally, they should have built some kind of audience already. They should already have a following on Instagram. They should already have people who've signed up for their newsletter. And most of all, they need to be like Shackleton. They're going to be climbing a mountain, crossing the desert. There's ice. They need to have determination and a sense of adventure and a sense of humor. You throw all of that in, and then you've got something you can say, okay, let's do something. Oh, and by the way, you're still going to lose money for the next 3-4 years. So now let's talk about making a podcast network.
You are speaking the truth, but I love something, and I always see this guy, Dan. Dan is always laughing. And I feel like you said, man, that sense of humor is important, because sometimes, you see these challenges and you just like, man, I can't believe that this happened, or that this is happening. And you just have to laugh, bro. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Laugh or cry, right? So I'm with you 10,000%. Dan, what is your take on the question?
No, I think both Donald and Gavin have answered it very well. The only thing I'll add on top of everything is maybe a couple of things. One, you need good people. You just need to be good people. Because like Gavin said, it's early. We don't know. We're experimenting. You need to follow through on your contract. And a lot of these guys, and that's just about being good, because the time it takes to follow up with people, the legal process is too long for us to be building a product. If I need to be suing you just so that I can come back to then build the products, a colossal waste of time. So you really need to find good people. And then the other thing I'll say, they, in addition to the sense of humor, they need to be willing to change. Ideas evolve in the podcasting space very quickly. And if you're married to an idea and you're committed to just this one way of looking at it, we won't be able to build. Because as Gavin so rightly put it, this thing is not top of mind for the people who are spending yet. And so it's not yet time to play hardball. It's about trying things out. If they have $10, let's try it. If they have $100, let's try it. And let's keep trying until there's confidence for us to then maybe take in a ticket that's, $10,000. But that will take time. Your 12 people may end up buying 50,000 worth of product, but we need to test it. We need to actually reach the 12 people, then we know if they're going to do it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. But you guys, Dan and Gavin, you brought up something very important, and Donald, we always have a conversation about this too, is that a lot of times creators, they come into the space, right? They want to join a network, or they want to become a podcaster because they're thinking about money first, which, like you said, Gavin, usually equates to pod fading. But in that, a lot of times they're expecting the network to do all of the groundwork for them, which is why, with you guys in your incubator programs or your JVs, you're looking for people who are already, on the path, or who have already done some work. But with your experience with having so many different podcasts underneath your umbrella, how has your experience getting podcasts monetized been? Can you give us like some ins and outs and some details? Feel free to kick us off, Gavin.
I think you used the word networking, and I think there's an important mindset that people should bear in mind. We've all heard of these networking events in our city where we get together once a month and we meet like-minded people and we do business with each other. That networking formal concept. Anybody who's succeeded in that will tell you, you succeed by going in there saying, who can I buy from? Not who can I sell to. If you go into that situation, who can I sell to, you're going to have a disappointing time, because you've gone in there saying, well, I, instead of doing marketing, I'm joining this organization and they're going to do everything for me. You're in for a world of pain. You need to go in there and say, I'm already got a successful business. You know what would be nice? I need a copier at a better rate. Who here sells? You want to be the person in the room buying from your network. So if you overlay that thinking on a podcast network, it's not, hey, I've joined your network. What size audience are you going to bring me? Or what you need to be arriving there saying, who's doing what, who can help me build what I'm doing? Who's a voice? Who's got music? You need to be putting some of your money into the pot to make it successful for everybody. And that's the first philosophy that makes it a network distinct from it pretending to be a marketing arm for aggregating podcasts. In terms of monetizing podcasts, name me somebody who became famous from podcasting. I'll wait.
Yeah, and I think that's
you can name lots of people who are famous in podcasting, but they were famous before they started.
Correct.
On their way.
Yeah. So that this is not the way to become Joe Rogan.
No,
right.
You become Joe Rogan first.
Yeah,
right.
Yes.
Well, people forget he was a fighter and he was also a sports commentator for a long period of time. In addition to doing, wasn't he hosting like X Factor or some type of shows at one point?
Stand-up comedy as well. So those people made podcasting famous, but podcasting didn't make them famous. So we're still in that stage where people need to be bringing stuff. And contributing that way, not coming there saying, well, I've got some great content. You guys make me famous. It's not that. It's just not that. So monetizing it, extremely hard. You guys are all going to tell the same story. It's extremely hard to monetize. My advice is, if you've got a great idea and you've bounced it off somebody like the three of us, four of us, and somebody says, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. We'll back you. We'll put some time and effort and facilities and editing into it. You know what would be good? Who do you know who's got a business, who's got some discretionary budget, who'll give it to you without too many questions? They're not going to come back and say how many conversions, how many listens, because we haven't got that accurate data with a startup podcast with 50 listens. But you can right from the start launch that podcast saying, here's my podcast brought to you by ABC Enterprises. Thank you for your sponsorship for making this possible, and get on with the show right from the get-go. And there's something inauthentic about building a podcast, 50 episodes, and then suddenly finding a sponsor and selling your audience. You know, they're stuck with you for the first 50 episodes and they're your people. And suddenly you got a sponsor and say, hey, before I give you my show, here, I'm selling you to this chicken franchise. No, man, what have you just done there? So if you intend to monetize your podcast by building an audience, then be authentic and get a sponsor from the get-go, even if it's your sister's business or your next door neighbor, but your audience should know that that's your intent.
Yeah, carry some fake ads. I say that all the time. If you need to make some fake ads, you can carry some SemaBOX ads, but then carry them from the get-go. I think is that there's an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity for people to make money through podcasting. So that I believe exists. But I agree that it takes more determination and grit than it does good ideas, because delivery is everything. I don't know. For me, delivery is everything. If you can't deliver whatever it is you're doing, then I'm not on board at all. I don't care how good the idea is. How you deliver it is the critical thing. And remember, we're competing for time, guys. That's what we are. And when you're competing for time, you're competing with somebody sitting under a tree, because it's entertainment, right? A guy could sit under a tree and feel very entertained that day, just by watching the birds or watching some people across the road. And so you have to have something that they are interested in listening to, and also that then somebody else is willing to put money behind. And that comes down to connection, authenticity, as Gavin says, interactivity probably, and then also, and this is critical, and I feel like I'm going to be a broken record, but delivery. If you do not deliver this well, we have no hope of moving to anything.
Yeah, I agree. But I think one thing that Gavin spoke to earlier on, I think is key when it comes to monetization. And that's, he spoke on the metrics by which
did we lose Donald?
podcast numbers are podcast.
Don, we lost you. You're gonna have to go back
sorry.
a sentence or
Yeah, I
two.
lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I was saying was that I think when it comes to the monetization conversation, I think Gavin spoke a little bit about it when he brought up the metrics by which podcast numbers are assessed. I think that's huge, especially in our experience in Ghana. It's huge when it comes to having, monetization conversations with sponsors and brands, because like they sort of use their experience with the radio numbers. They just use that. They just translate that into how they assess podcast numbers. When we are telling them that, look, if you do an ad on podcasts that, a particular community is passionate about, that podcast lives on for like, it's indefinite. Like that ad stays on there. Every time someone from that community in the near future, is exposed to that podcast, they are going to hear that ad and they are going to have that presence of mind for your brand. But a lot of these brands, they don't understand that. It's like, why don't you have 20,000 listeners? Why don't you have, whatever number of streams per episode? You understand? And it's always a very difficult conversation to have. And I think for us, we realized that we needed to show some of these brands the audience, so that's when we started venturing into live events. We started doing little live events, here and there. So they would come and then they would see people gathering because of the podcast show and then say, okay, you know what? This is evidence of the fact that these listeners exist or whatever. It might not be the full representation of, the community, but it's, at least we are seeing them now. You understand me? And a lot of brands around here love live activations. They just love people to see their things, So for us, I think, it was hard because live events are not easy. It's not easy to set up those things. But for us, that was one way that we experimented in trying to convince people about how tangible the podcast audience was. And then also, Dan, I think you also mentioned fake ads. When we started the shows, we just reached out to our friends and like, look, if you have a legitimate business or something that you're running, just let us know, or we'll just run an ad for you on the podcast show. So people were hearing these ads and then they're like, oh, what? I didn't know I could actually do an ad on the podcast, how much would it cost to do an ad like this, things like that. So then people sort of see it and then they now feel like they can, it's a service that they can subscribe to. So I think for the community here in Ghana, and I think to some degree elsewhere as well, people love to see, they would like them seeing the experience helps in, selling any monetization opportunity. Yeah.
No, most definitely. So I'm gonna chime in. You guys, I know all three of you guys, and I come from. I've done a lot of production. We're only at 900 episodes, so we're not yet to 1,000 yet, Dan. So we're hoping to catch up. But one of the things that I've seen around monetization, I think what Dan was saying about delivery. I would definitely call consistency as well, right? Is being able to deliver that same quality of product on a consistent basis, and of course, you three are doing the work in order to make sure that creatives can do that. But in addition to that, I think one of the ways that sometimes creators, they fail to look at podcasting is sometimes they don't look at podcasting as a lead magnet in order for you to get more opportunities, right? Like my thing is, and I tell this to every potential client, everybody that I meet, people podcast for 3 reasons when it boils down to it: income, leads, or authority, right? And all of those 3 things end up leading into more opportunities and into more potential money. So you might not make a lot of money off of your podcast directly in ad sales, but if you got a speaking engagement somewhere for $5,000 or, for, 100,000 Kenyan shillings or, down a city, or, rand, that's a result of you being an expert and authority, from your podcast. So sometimes looking at it and doing the work is not as directly correlated, but you can get these other opportunities for it. So it's very important to open up your mind to how and what the opportunities can be from being a podcaster and being an expert in your particular field. And what you guys were saying about the ambassador ads, you were saying fake ads. I call them ambassador ads, which is, a term where kind of like, you know, you're doing something maybe like at a minimal cost, but these particular types of ads let people know that you're serious about your show, right? Because if somebody's podcasting, you know, strictly for leads, that's different than that show's going to be different. The CTAs are going to be different than somebody who's podcasting for authority, right? And so when you keep all of these things in mind and you're doing these promo swaps, right? Like one thing that kind of where I think that we have an opportunity to improve in the ecosystem is podcasters actually collaborating and doing more promo swaps amongst themselves in order to help grow the ecosystem. Prime example, Gavin's running Solid Gold. You know, there should be a conversation going on with Gold Coast as well as SemaBOX and vice versa all together in AfriPods to run ambassador ads for each other, maybe at little to no cost, but in order to promote and to move the ecosystem forward as a whole, even though we're in different markets, you know what I mean? With the right opportunity for one network or for a particular podcast, we can use those as case studies in order to push things forward overall. And that's just something that's kind of like been on my heart as I've been analyzing and studying the industry for some time. But, you know, feel free to chime in on that idea, gents, and, you know, what do you guys think?
Yo, I'm ready. We just need to know, when do we meet? It's time to do these things. The less we talk about it, the better.
Yeah, but Dan, can we trust you to deliver? That's the question.
I can deliver. For sure.
No, but yeah, I think it's a very good. I think it's a very good idea. So
yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed, right, is go ahead. Sorry, Gavin.
I'm getting an echo from somebody. Somebody's getting an echo from somebody.
I think it might be me. The room that I'm in, it definitely has high ceilings.
There's a whole repeat. Okay, there it went away.
Podcast producers checking the audio. Yeah.
Kevin, you talked about the three motivations or three reasons that people make podcasts. Very, very early on, we have to do a reality check with our clients. People arrive every day, I want to make a podcast, and they need to be honest. They need to be sincere. If you're making a podcast because you want to be famous, tell us that. Don't tell us, I just want to add value to my community, because we're going to make a different podcast. One of them is you can't get a job as a DJ. You can't get onto an FM station. So you're doing something different, but you're trying for the same result. You're trying to build an audience so you can sell Johnny Walker ads to make a living. You make a different program when that's your intention. You need to have broad appeal. You need to be controversial. You need to have famous people come on. That's a very different thing from saying, I want to go back to my fish. I want to talk to people about breeding fish. Do I really want an advert for fish food on my podcast? No. I want the people who are breeding fish to hire me to come and help them build their fish farm and advise them on. That's the thing. In some regards, a podcast is more like a billboard or a business card. You know, how do you measure the ROI on a business card? Well, I can't. Okay, so don't print business cards. No, absurd. You still print them. It'd be nice if I got a sponsor for my business card. What? That would just be absurd. So it's that. But that's not the same as I'm trying to build an audience and be famous. Different animal.
Yeah. You know, I actually want to piggyback off of that. Two things. Number one is, you know, when I'm bringing on a new like production client, you know, in my production time, that's the first question that I ask is, what's your goal? And usually you do get that answer of, oh, well, you know, I just want to add value, or I just want to do this. And the way that I address that is I say, okay, you're going to pay for the production. We're going to produce for you. You're going to spend X amount of dollars. In 6 months, what makes that investment worth it to you? And that helps them change the perspective to, hey, you know what, this is an actual investment, not only of my time, which is probably the most valuable, but also of my financial resources and, you know, the resources of others potentially. And once you do that, you're able to really hone in on what it is that they want, Gavin. So I really, you know, I'm really in alignment with what you just said. But with that being said, you guys all have shows that stand out more than others, right? Within your networks. So my question to you, you know, as to inform those who are thinking about podcasting, who want to be a part of a network or anything like that, is how did your biggest shows become the biggest shows? Was it the talent? Was it the strategy? Or was it something else that made this show grow exponentially and stand out? Anybody can kick us off. Donald, kick us off, please. You have Sincerely Accra. I know some of you guys is different shows, but I'll let you speak on it. And please mention the show as a shout out to your amazing work.
Okay.
And some of the numbers too.
Yeah, so I think Sincerely Accra is the biggest show in Ghana right now. Sincerely Accra, we started Sincerely Accra in 2018. And I think to your question, it's a combination of the talent and it's also a combination of the strategy as well. I think with the show Sincerely Accra in particular, we have a great producer who has a background in, sound, music, things like that. And in the host, we have someone who personality-wise is just amazing with delivery, as Dan, has been pitching, throughout this interview. His delivery is unique. He's able to, draw you in. He's able to make you laugh. He's able to make you, provoke your thoughts. He's able to make you, how do I say this? If you're uncomfortable about a particular conversation, he's able to ease you into it to the point where you're able to feel like, okay, I do have an opinion about this actually, And so once we had that combination of, once we have that combination of those two people, as a team working on this, organically, you have a product that speaks to the average Ghanaian, because Sincerely Accra is basically a show that captures the heart and soul of someone who typically lives in Accra, and Ghana in general, right? And then, so that's on the talent level. And then strategy-wise, we were able to think, okay, we record a podcast show a lot in the studio and people basically get the vibe, from the studio, right? Why don't we take this to the people? So one thing that Sincerely Accra is very famous for, popular for, is Vox Pops. So basically what the host does is he goes to very popular locations, within the city where a lot of people are gathered and having a good time. And then he just basically asks them random questions. So, with the laughter, the, awkward moments, all of that stuff, if you just put all those opinions together on the podcast, it just, makes people, it just entertains people, really. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the major, these are some of the things that, have made Sincerely Accra, the kind of show that it is. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors.
I can give you some examples of stuff, and they're still divided into two groups. One is popular content aimed at building a large audience, and one of our popular shows is Convos and Cocktails, which is Lesego Klabi. We added technical and recording and studio and that kind of value to her show. Her content is her content. She is who she is. She's brought her vibe and energy into podcasting. So we have very little to claim in terms of, wow, that podcast is doing nicely. It's not like we made that happen. Whether she had landed a show on a radio station or that path was, it's her journey, and it was an inevitable path for her. So yeah, it's content that's not available on radio. So it's the only place you can get it. But she's sending people from her Insta account to her podcast. The podcast is not sending people to her Insta account. It's still Lesego is making the podcasting more famous than podcasting is making her famous. So we're still away from the Simpsons effect. Now, I don't know how old, let's not give away ages, but Simpsons was a spin-off from the Tracy Ullman show. It was a show on television which had these little breakouts with these little short animated clips in them. And they caught fire and became their own series. In the same way as Frasier was a spin-off from Cheers. When somebody is a guest on Lesego and she's hosting this person once every 3 or 4 episodes, and the audience starts saying, we want to hear more of that, and we start spinning podcasts off from that, then I think we're seeing organic new seeds growing and the birth of something from podcasting. And the metric on this is still conventional. How big is the audience? We're chasing numbers here. When we get clients, like we've got the Viktor Frankl Association, they do amazing work, and they've got a podcast that's aimed at informing people more about what they do. So their listenership is in the hundreds and thousands, low thousands for an episode. But in the space they play in, that's huge. That is really, really significant. So you can't compare 1,000 here with 1,000 in the other. There are such different things. So what's the measure of success? We've had clients make a podcast with a target audience of 4 people, 5 people, sometimes 1 person. So yeah, we're making this podcast to talk about something. We're going to push it out to the whole audience, but we made it with the intent of influencing this 1 person in that organization. And we're going to make sure that they hear the podcast, and they will never know we made the podcast with the intention of influencing them. How do you measure the value of that, and how do you quantify it, and how do you charge for that? It's really, really, that's part of the adventure we're on, is experiment, try stuff, and see what sticks around. I'm sure you've all had experiences with clients where no matter how much you talk, they just come back and say, well, send us the numbers and we'll decide whether we're going to make a podcast or not. And others go, wow, that's awesome. Here's money. Let's make some podcasts.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for me, the only thing I would add is, I think if you're asking what makes something big, for me, it's strategy. If you get big without strategy, then you won't be sustainable. In my experience, you'll get big and then you'll go away. So the strategy is really the critical part. What we've tried at SemaBOX, we've launched a lot of podcasts. I think we've launched over 100 podcasts because we were, like just Gavin was mentioning, we are experimenters. We are open to try as many different ideas as possible and see what sticks in the different directions. So there's something that's just lifestyle, so just making people happy. And there's other stuff that's information, advocacy, blah, blah, blah. Of the shows we've launched, I think TMI was the one that we launched that became kind of the big one last year. This year we have a new one called the Social Newsroom that's just starting out. That's really big, 50,000 listens a week. We think that's big. And there are many others, but what I know as a producer, sitting, like looking at a macro level, I see some things that we can repeat. I'm beginning to see some things that we can repeat. And what that's telling me is that your strategy has to be first. And we can swap out. I'm so sorry to the creators. We can actually swap out the creators. If you don't have the right delivery, but we have the right strategy, yeah, we can get another creator with a better delivery. And then we can get that show going. And so I think in the future, my prediction for the future, here's my big bet, Gavin. My big bet in the future is that people who are making shows at this scale that we are doing and looking at it at a kind of macro scale, we are going to have a better opportunity to be successful because we have skin in the game and real dollars invested. The weekend warriors who want to do 1 episode a month or something like that, that's really not going to be, that's going to get harder and harder to keep your audience engaged because your audience is going to get more exposed to other stuff. So in your example, Gavin, if you're interested in breeding fish with yellow spots, and then the guy who does that podcast doesn't make one in 2 months, then you're going to be interested in the guy who speaks to you weekly, but wants to breed fish with blue spots. And then like, okay, let me try the blue guy because I can talk to him every week. Because every single day there's a hunger and demand for content. And if you're not able to meet that, unfortunately, the audience will move. That's my prediction.
Yeah. I think I would like to speak a little bit to something Dan said. I think commitment and strategy go hand in hand because in as much as, we've worked with podcasters that have the talent and are also committed and are able to implement, strategies to make the show grow. We've also had, I've also met people who on paper should be great hosts, should be great podcasters, but that element of commitment and implementing strategy, not just knowing the strategy or creating a strategy, but actually putting in the work to implement it. They don't have that, and so you have a great idea or a great show dead in the water, just because of that. And so, yeah, talent is great. I think this applies generally in life as well. Yeah, talent is great, but if you don't have that combination of commitment and strategy, it's most likely not going to go anywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah. What's that old saying? The
harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah, exactly. And luck, and also that hard work will beat talent any day of the week, right? So these people who are really committed to it, if you're waiting, if your episode is out at 9 o'clock and the other guy's episode came out earlier, hey, guess what? He has more listens than you.
The topic of luck has been on my mind for a while. We talk about the harder you work, the luckier you get, but there are different kinds of luck. The first kind of luck, and I'm just kind of scrolling through something I looked at a little while ago, so pardon me if I pause a little bit. The first kind of luck is just blind luck. It's just luck. You just happen to be at the right place, right time. The second one is luck of motion. That's the, I'm showing up, I'm doing the stuff, I'm moving in a direction, I'm making a show every 2 weeks. Sponsor found me, that was lucky. Yeah, it's different from, just sheer luck. Then there's the luck in preparation. That's the hard work. I'm improving my interview skills. I'm finding better guests. And then there's a fourth one, which is really interesting, which is luck of uniqueness. What's unique about you? What show could only you make? And it kind of changes your thinking about, yeah, you were lucky. Yeah. Was I just lucky, or was it one of the other three lucks?
Yeah. No, I'm gonna jump right in. Dan, so one of my teammates in college actually said that to me. He was like, "Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard." And like,
yeah,
always in my mind, man, because it's such a real quote, bro. But I think what you guys are saying, it's the combination of the producer, the person putting together the strategy. But I think, for all of us, and what we're saying is that some of this still goes back to what's the goal, right? And that's super important. And as we're talking about this and talking through it, we're talking about growth. And what I've noticed about your three different companies is that, like, Donald, you guys do, oh my God, what?
Mosaic?
Oh my God. Yes, you do Mosaic. I'm so sorry. So Donald, you guys do Mosaic, which is an amazing conference. Had the opportunity to attend it. Gavin, you have a newsletter. Dan, you guys are doing conferences, but also, very active on social media. So you're having these different touch points with your creators and also with your audiences in order to make sure that you're staying, in touch. How do these avenues complement or help your audio business overall? And are there any things that you're looking to get into, in 2023 that you haven't done before? So Dan,
I think Donald should go first, and then he should tell us why we don't have invites to Mosaic.
Oh my goodness!
I'm feeling left out here. I don't know Mosaic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Gavin, did you get an invite? I didn't get one. I want an invite.
Kevin just threw me under the bus, but yeah.
Dunk, dunk.
Mosaic. Mosaic is basically our live podcast event. We do it in November every year. Well, at least for the past 2 years, because we started just a year ago. It's an event where we basically bring all of our podcasters together, on stage, interacting with different guests. We have all of the different audiences from the podcast shows all coming together as well to also interact with the different hosts and guests as well. And so a lot of people actually do some discovery of our other shows on the network at Mosaic. Mosaic is also something where we also invite other podcasters in Ghana as well to come to. So they are also bringing their audience to Mosaic as well. So Mosaic is a pretty big event that, we are starting to grow, and hopefully in 2023 we can have Gavin and Dan.
Yeah. When do we get my invite? I need to buy my
Well,
ticket.
see, I might be busy then.
After the
November.
show.
So this is how it's going to be.
So like I said, I feel like, with us, live events have been very good for us in terms of growing our audience, because we bring these different audiences and communities together to discover with each other and interact with each other. So there's now value there. I think for what we are not doing that we want to do more of this year, when we started, with the podcast and stuff, we were really trying to grow the audio space. For us, audio was what we were really trying to grow. We wanted, as a culture, we felt like people were very used to watching videos, and we just wanted to sell the value of listening to an audio podcast on your way to work, listening to a podcast while you get ready for work, listening to a podcast on your drive to work, on your run, that sort of thing. So for us, video was not something that was at the forefront of what we're doing. But, having done it for some time now, we've gotten to the point where there's some demand for that, so people are asking, oh, why won't you do long form video podcasts, that type of thing. So this is something that we are looking to explore. We are, putting things in place to try and do more video this year. So yeah, that's something that we're trying to do, because people also do discover podcasts through video. There are some podcasts that I listen to that I discovered on YouTube. I didn't discover on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else. I discovered while watching YouTube, and then now I listen to them on my podcast player. So that's a space that we're also trying to get into, that we feel would help with discovery. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
I'm
Dan,
happy to throw some thoughts in. Go for it, Dan.
Let me cut in front of you, Gavin. I think, we've done, like I said, we are an experimentation space, really. We are trying everything. We have a creator conference we call Podex, which we try to do once a year. So we didn't do one last year, so that's why you didn't get the invites, but there will be one this year. The invites will come. And we know we are trying. Social media is such an interesting space for us in the market that we are working with, and our creators and their communities. And so we are interested in being there, because we're finding ways to get them listenership and get them clients, and get them monetization as well. I guess the thing that I could say that has been interesting for us is just understanding the power of community, that the journey is podcaster community monetization. If you don't do the community part, you can't get to the monetization part. That's been our experience anyway, and that's the thing we're trying to push. Wherever your community is, make sure you engage with them and you're talking to them, and then we can work with that to try and monetize. And so that's in two ways. Either, like Gavin said, you sell the community to Coca-Cola or some big brand, or you invite the big brand into the community so they participate in it. So there's been those two strategies that we're trying, but what we've seen is product, community, monetization, and there isn't a shortcut that we found.
That's lovely. That's a really good insight. We are. I'm a bit of a pragmatic fundamentalist. We focusing as much attention as we possibly can on landing the bread and butter clients, people with real budgets for real work, who appreciate the work we do. It's part of their communication strategy. It pays the bills, keeps the lights on, keeps the editors. We need to be here so that we can help other people build stuff. Oxygen mask in an airline, put it on first. And if we were 3/4 startups and ideas and incubator, we'd be out of business. We can't. So we got to focus on that. So in that regard, it's no different from building any business. It doesn't matter that it's a podcast business. We've got to look after our own clients. And it's very easy for people to lose sight of who their customer is and where their customer is. if Donald Trump taught us something, it's that you might think you have an audience of 55 million people, but step out of line and somebody takes them away from you. Guess what? It was never your audience. So whatever you're doing, whatever you're building, don't be building it on somebody else's platform. Don't be saying, well, I've got so many followers on Insta, I'm a hit. No. We use a mailing list because no matter who does what to me, I can just move somewhere else and email those people from somewhere else. I have those details. I'm not barred from Facebook or Instagram or something because of something silly that happened and now I can't communicate with my customers. So it's really important that you know who your customers are and you keep connected to them. Even better if they're corporate clients and you've got a phone number and a name and stuff. So understanding that and keeping those people protected and looked after. Anything built on top of that, again, still, I don't know if you've ever encountered Kevin Kelly, kk.org. Go there and look up his article called 1,000 True Fans or 1,000 Loyal Fans. It's been a while since I read it. Fundamental insights on what size audience you really need, but they need to be ardent fans. This isn't 1,000 casual fans. This needs to be 1,000 people who are prepared to get your podcast title tattooed on themselves. That's enough. That's enough for you to have a fantastic life and make a difference. And if you're getting a couple of $100 a year from each of those 1,000 people, it's significant money. So, I've kind of gone around and round in a bit, but what are we doing to grow things? Word of mouth has been our best. Without doubt, word of mouth is where most of our good businesses come from. And I don't think that's different for a restaurant or any other business. You can't invite people into your new restaurant with brochures saying free food if after they eat they don't come back. You need people coming in the front door, sitting down, eating, and not leaving out the back door. So you have to be doing good work. That's the standard. It's taken for granted. People have to be audible. The levels have to be good. Quality is built in. If people are enjoying your work and they like working with you, they're going to bring in another client. It has to be that. You've got to be found on Google. People have got to find you on Google. You've got to be putting your name into your podcast artwork, into your thank you for recording at our studios. That kind of stuff has got to be in there. There's no magic ad campaign we're going to put out that's going to convince a person to make a podcast series next week. There's too much thinking, too much strategy, too much work to be done to just click, buy, make a podcast.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from all three of you guys is the importance of community, right? And I think, you don't need 10 million downloads, you need 50 downloads from the right people, right? And earlier, something that when I was doing my research in South Africa, this became very, very apparent. I think through some of my conversations with you, Gavin, and some of the other players there, was how people were doing targeted pods toward, like, let's say they wanted partners or clients who were at particular companies at a particular level, let's say C-suite, all at the top banks. They were making pods that these type of people would listen to, you know what I mean? And about that expertise, whether or not the podcaster was selling insurance or they wanted, they were in HR and things like that. So they were really using it as a very focused lead magnet. And I think that that's super important. And I can speak from one of my experiences in production. I took a gentleman from idea to top 3 in his niche in the world, and it was in solar. And this guy wasn't getting 10,000 downloads a month or, per episode or anything like that. But his income increased, his leads increased to the point that he couldn't handle them, and his authority in the niche due to his strategy turned him into a rock star in his industry. And so what we're all saying here, it's a combination of these things that helps us. But as a network, those different touch points that we have and that we make with the creators, with the listeners, and being able to own the ability to reach out and touch your community without an intermediary is what really makes it go. And that article by Kyle Kelly, I think it is, KK, is actually very, very influential and has a lot of value and impact. So I definitely in alignment with that aspect of what all three of you gentlemen are saying. So with that being said, have only a couple more questions for you, but I'm going to put you guys on the hot seat, and you're going to have to answer.
Bring it on. I know you're going to edit out the. If I just throw in an F-bomb, then I know you have to edit that bad answer out, and you can redo it.
Okay.
How to get yourself off the hot spot.
So the first two are like high pressure. It's like 60 seconds or less. The last one probably won't take you more than 30. So are you guys ready?
I think I am.
All right, cool. So I guess we'll go Gavin, Don, Dan. All right. What does the future of podcasting look like to you?
The word podcasting is not the important thing. It's always about content. We're going to go screenless. We're going to go deep audio interaction with the internet. We're going to get into our car and say, I want to go trout fishing in Central Africa. Where should I go? And Google's going to speak back to me and say, there's a podcast set in Ghana about trout fishing in September. Do you want to listen to the episode? I haven't even looked at my screen, haven't even touched my phone. I'm in my car. I think there. And I think everything we used to reading, everything we can read, we're soon going to be able to just listen to. And the word podcast is very convenient right now, but it's, you don't go, in South Africa, the Sunday Times is part of a weekly tradition. You don't go, well, let's go and buy the Sunday Times newspaper. You just go and buy the Sunday Times. It's a given that it's a newspaper. So it's going to be, did you listen to the show, or did you listen to ABC? Not ABC podcast. I think we're going to stop using the word podcast and just talk about the content.
Love that. Donald.
Same thing. Goodness, where do
Good
I go from Gavin?
What do you say?
What do I say after that? No, honestly, all I can do is agree with Gavin. Honestly, like I think that's a future I also envisage. I think maybe we might get to the point where podcasters will become celebrities. It kind of goes hand in hand with the future Gavin has, shared. So I think for me that's it.
I'm going to disagree a little and say that I think that we're going to see a more stronger performance from the micro podcasters. They're going to be smaller podcasters with more committed audiences.
Okay, I'm going to jump in on this question. And I'm going to say that I think what we're going to see, and Gavin might push back on this, I think we're going to see bigger media houses help to usher this in as a staple. And I think that the youth are going to have to get heavily involved in order for it to become something sustainable. But we have to merge the two and bring the two together. You know what I mean? Like the media houses, along with the advertising agencies and the other players in the game, and kind of put us all together in order to make this a sustainable thing. So I think that that's on the horizon, and more collaboration.
I'm not going to push back. They don't have a choice. The money is trending towards the space. They have to get in there. But they're going to encounter the same challenges that music on the internet found, which is there's an expectation of it being free and it's easy to copy. So try and monetize it. Good luck. Resistance from the audience to being monetized. That's tough. And the Netflix effect. I can skip your ad. So put in many ads as you like. There's some podcasts I listen to that you tell your podcast player, skip the first 3 minutes. So they're going to get in there and they're going to be taking advertisers' money for adverts that nobody's listening to, and that's not sustainable. So it's not a sustainable model, but what is the model? We don't know yet.
Dan, you have something?
No, I think with the model, the traditional advertising model will be broken. That's what we need to see. The traditional reach, you're not going to be able to advertise on reach in the next few years.
Okay. All right. Next question. Another 60 seconds. What excites you about Africa Podcast Day, and why is it important?
This time I'm not going
first. I'll be first. Shout out to Africa Podfest, Melissa and Joe for founding this day. We remember them and their hard work, and it's nice to honor them. I think it's opportunity. It's nice to be talking with people who are from different parts of Africa, and we can put this medium to test. I think podcasting is going to grow in a very different way on the African continent. So it's nice that we are talking. We're going to see how because we are the ones moving it. So it's nice to be connected now.
Love it.
I think I'll go next. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. So I think Africa Podcast Day is very important when it comes to amplifying African voices. I feel like, generally, when it comes to Africa and our stories, we have often seen other people come and then tell our stories for us. And I think podcasts are slowly giving the African community the opportunity to tell our own stories, and when we tell it ourselves, I think it's authentic, and I think it's portrayed in the best way that it can be, unlike somebody else, telling it for us. And so I think, Africa Podcast Day is very important because it's amplifying this medium that is allowing us to take control of that narrative. So yeah, for me, that's it.
I think the magic word here is hustling. The challenges that podcasting has in Africa are different from what they are in New York City. We have data issues, we have distance issues, we have language issues. There are so many different things. So podcasting is the ultimate form of hustling with content. We often faced with people saying, well, how's my audience going to get it? They don't have data. Are they visiting a community center or a clinic or some government department once a week, once every 2 weeks? Well, when they walk in there, their phone connects, synchronizes, and downloads all the content. And when they get home, they've got a phone full of podcasts to listen to without needing the data and stuff. So that's a complete workaround the challenges. It's an example of the workaround of the challenges we have. You can't explain that to somebody who lives in New York that, well, I haven't got data. I have to wait until I go and take my kid for their vaccination before I can get my podcasts. But that's the reality we're dealing with here. And podcasting it's just a magic tonic for those challenges. Store and forward, as you connect, so the data goes out. And I think we might find people experimenting with, well, I've got the podcast on my phone. I go back to my home where nobody has data, but my phone pings out that I have this latest podcast and shares it phone to phone. That kind of thing might be an African manifestation before the internet becomes pervasive. We might see that as an interim solution.
Okay. So Gavin, what would you say excites you about Africa Podcast Day, and why do you feel like it's important?
Because it's a collection of people who are thinking like that.
Love it. Love it. Okay. And I'm going to jump in on the question again. And I'm going to say, big shout out and thank you to Melissa and Josephine from Africa Podfest for making Africa Podcast Day a staple in the African podcast community. Without them, we wouldn't even be celebrating it. So I think that's something that's one of the reasons why I think that is so important. But the fact that, the African creators, like you said, Donald, for so long have not been able to tell their own stories, and now have the opportunity to, and to have a day to celebrate, authentic African stories, I think is something that can't be underestimated or talked about enough. So I'm excited about Africa Podcast Day because I'm excited to see where the future of it lies and where it goes. And honestly, how you guys' businesses grow, how AfriPods grows, and how, the industry grows as a whole. So I'm ecstatic, and I'm always available to chat and always want to talk about podcasting. But I guess the last question for you guys is, how can those who are viewing our video and who are participating in the Africa Podcast Day stay in contact with you? What's the best way to stay connected?
Join the mailing list. Always.
Okay. Tell us how. What's the email address? Like, how do we get in contact with you?
Solid Gold COSA. Click on find out more. Throw in your email address. We don't send too many emails, but that's how we try and stay in touch.
Okay. Can you spell that out, Gavin? I know it's Solid Gold, but the last part.
Sorry. solidgold.co.za.
Thank you.
Actually, solidgold.africa. I forgot we started that migration. Solidgold.africa.
Okay.
Love to hear it. Okay.
Love it.
You
can find us. Yeah, let me be jumping in here. us it's SemaBOX at SemaBOX Africa on all platforms. And then if you are into websites, SemaBOX.net.
Okay. Yes. So for us on social media, the Gold Coast Report, and then by email, social@thegoldcoastreport.com.
Man, it's been a pleasure to talk with you guys. Looking forward to having a conversation with you guys outside of this and to connecting you guys all together as well. So thank you for joining us for Africa Podcast Day and talking about, the strategies and the ways to run a successful podcast network in Africa.